Recently, I built my dream reptile room, and I spent months tailoring each enclosure to each animal. And after lots of hard work, it was great to sit back and enjoy this new reptile room for a bit. But in the back of my mind, I knew what was coming next. I had to do this process all over again. So let's continue building my second reptile room, which houses all my geckos. In part 1, we got the original reptile room all cleared out and painted this gorgeous pink color. We also ripped up the horrible carpet and put in some new lovely flooring. And I popped in my brand new pink shelving unit. In the last part, we also welcomed home a brand new addition, which is Egg the leopard gecko. And now he's out of quarantine, in this part we'll be setting up his proper enclosure, and we'll even be attending an expo to pick up not one, but 2 new additions to the reptile room. So let's get stuck right into finishing this reptile room and make my dream become a reality. Let's start by working on the first brand new enclosure. I picked up this 36x18 Viv off of Facebook Marketplace for £30, and it looks practically new, but I'm gonna give it a good disinfect like I do with all my secondhand enclosures. And once that was done, I spent no time messing around. Let's start making the custom background. This species is a terrestrial animal that comes from Australia, so I'm trying to make a perfect arid background that caters to this species' needs. I start by covering the entire back of the Viv in silicone. I'm using CT1 as it has barely any smell and it dries incredibly quickly, and I'm spreading it all over the back of the Viv. Once it's fully saturated, I take my ledges and I place it onto the silicone so that they can be secured in place. I repeat this with some small branches as well to add a bit of visual interest. Whilst the silicone is still wet, I place some dry excavator clay on top of it and giving it a good pat down so it sticks properly. I let this all dry for a few hours before moving on to the next step, which is adding water to the dry excavator clay to turn it into a proper clay paste. I take chunks of the clay and firmly press it against the background until the whole back of the Viv is covered in excavator clay. To make the background as solid as possible, I make layers of wet clay and dry clay. I feel like clay isn't even a word anymore. I've said it far too much. But anyway, I let this background dry for a good few days before moving it onto the shelf. I really do love the contrast of these black enclosures with this bright pink shelving unit. I think it looks great. But although it looks good, it definitely doesn't feel good. Moving these Vivs on my own is a bit of a task. But now it's time for one of the most important parts of any reptile enclosure, and that is their heating and lighting. First, I installed this ceramic bulb holder, and this will hold a 25-watt halogen lamp. I also installed the brackets for a 7% Shade Dweller UVB unit. And if you've ever set one of these up inside of a Viv before, you know how much of a struggle this can be. But once that was installed, I connected the ceramic bulb holder to this dimming thermostat to properly control the temperature. And now this enclosure is ready to be set up. But first, I need to start working on yet another background. This enclosure is a 12x12x18 Exoterra, and it's for another new addition joining the family. I'm using a similar technique that I used last time, however, I'm not putting a thick clay paste over the top. This enclosure is for another Australian reptile, however, this one is teeny tiny and they are arboreal, which means they like to climb. So I'm using small branches so it's easy for them to get up and down that background. Then I'm covering it in some Beardy Life. Beardy Life really gives that true Aussie outback feel, and I absolutely love how this very easy, simple background turned out. But now let's go back to setting up the first enclosure whilst this one dries for a few days. Another important aspect of any reptile enclosure is the substrate. I'm using a mix of Beardy Life and some topsoil to create a really deep substrate that's great for burrowing. As this gecko is nocturnal, it'll spend most of its time in its burrows during the day. Have you guessed what it is yet? Let me know down in the comments what you think I'm bringing home before I reveal it at the end of the video. Anyway, back to the setup. On the warm side, I'm using a piece of slate for basking and placing a hide on top. He's also got a small humid hide in the middle for when he sheds, and a third hide on the other side of the enclosure to cool himself down. This enclosure is going to be naturalistic, not bioactive, so I'm using fake plants to try and replicate this animal's natural habitat. I'm using different textures to create different hiding spots. And once it was done, I added the signature black tracks to make the room look more cohesive. For the second setup, I'm repeating a similar process, using Beardy Life and topsoil for the substrate and adding in a little humid hide and this coconut hide. I'm placing in this feeding ledge to offer them water and some calcium powder. Then I'm using different thicknesses and lengths of branches to create different basking opportunities for this gecko. And just like the other setup, I'm using fake plants to try and create some cover. This animal needs quite a warm basking spot, so I'm trying out one of Reptile Systems' mini eco halogens. I bought this myself, I found it on eBay. Reptile Systems, if you're watching this, please sponsor me, okay? I use all your products, I love them. But anyway, I connected this heat lamp to a dimming thermostat, of course, and I've also given this animal a jungle dawn for some visible light and a UVB unit. So those are both of the brand new setups all complete, and I'm ready to bring home my new additions. But before we do that, I've got even more tasks to do, like giving Cheese, my crested gecko, a neighbor. Honey, my gargoyle gecko, will be moving in right next door in this beautiful custom PVC enclosure. And Egg the leopard gecko needs his setup finishing too, so I've got a lot to get done before we go and attend this reptile expo. Let's start by working on Egg's enclosure first. Egg has done perfectly in this quarantine-ish setup, so he's ready for some proper substrate and proper hiding and climbing opportunities. For substrate, I'm using a mix of organic topsoil and some Exoterra stone desert. I'm sloping this towards the back so he has a good few inches of substrate to burrow in. Using a couple pieces of slate and a warm hide, I'm creating a really nice basking area that Egg loves to use. In the middle of the enclosure, he's got his humid hide, which is vital for shedding, and then on the left-hand side, he's got a cool hide as well. Using extra pieces of cork bark, branches, and slate, I'm creating loads more hiding opportunities without necessarily adding another hide. This enclosure also utilizes fake plants to provide cover and clutter for Egg so that he doesn't feel shy when he's moving around. And once the water bowl and glass was added back to the enclosure, he was ready to go in. While this enclosure size is the minimum for most leopard geckos, I really do want to upgrade Egg in the future because, as you can see, he is abnormally large for a leopard gecko. While I don't necessarily think he is a giant leopard gecko, I do think his morph has something to do with it. I believe the max snow gene or eclipse gene tends to elongate the length of a leopard gecko's body. Now, I don't really know what Egg's morph is because I got him from a rehoming site, but I do know for sure that his morph has played a factor in his body structure and his face structure, as he just looks a little bit odd, but he's happy and healthy, and that's all that matters, and I would love to eventually put him into a bigger enclosure because he is a bigger leopard gecko. If you've been watching for a while, and I mean like from the very start, then you know how big of a day this is. Today, Honey's new vivarium arrived, and I finally got to build it. Honey is my gargoyle gecko, and I've had her for over 2 years now. And while there isn't necessarily anything wrong with her old setup, it's made of wood, and it's the last viv that needs changing to black. So let's finally get Honey into a black PVC vivarium. I bought this enclosure myself from Viperia's website, but if you would like to get your own, there is a link in the pinned comment, and I do get commission when you use that link, so thank you so much for supporting the channel for those of you who have used it. I slotted in Honey's Viv right next to Cheese's, and it's so nice to finally have them next to each other. I can't believe Cheese is the same size as Honey now. I made sure to seal this enclosure with silicone too, so that there were no leaks going on, and whilst that was drying, I started my prep work for the background, which included cutting these pieces of wood to size. I then flipped the enclosure onto its back, and I started to cover the background with expanding foam. I'm using the Tiger landscaping foam in black, as it is completely waterproof, fish safe and pet safe. Once the background was covered in foam, I started to add in my wooden branches, cork bark pieces and tunnels. Then I take some cocoa fiber and place this straight on top of the wet expanding foam, and this does hold fairly well. I'd recommend carving and siliconing on a larger enclosure, but this 1818 by 36 enclosure works perfectly for this method. Once my background had fully cured for over 24 hours, I just used my hoover to get rid of any excess cocoa fiber that was left over. I then popped in my drainage layer and added my substrate on top of that. For substrate, I'm using a mix of topsoil and cocoa fiber. I added a good few inches of this, gave it a good mix round, and then capped off the substrate with some leaf litter. I'm going to be setting this up as bioactive, so I need some live plants. I added a gorgeous snake plant, this umbrella tree, and a rubber tree as well. All three of these plants will grow nice and tall, which is perfect for an arboreal enclosure. I also placed this bromeliad into the background, and now it's time for the cleanup crew. My cleanup crew consists of giant orange isopods and some tropical springtails. Both of these will eat any decaying leaves or waste that's been left over. I left the enclosure for a couple of weeks before adding Honey in, as I wanted the plants to have time to settle. Here's how the enclosure was looking. All that was left to add was a feeding spot for Honey, as these guys like to eat in the trees. So once that was added in, I could finally pop Honey into her brand new home. It's so nice having Cheese and Honey next to each other when I originally got them together and from the same breeder. Both crested geckos and gargoyle geckos are fantastic pets, and they have their own little quirks. I highly recommend the both of them. But with that enclosure having been completed, that means that the reptile room is finally done. This was over 6 months of hard work, but it was so worth it. And of course, as a treat to myself, I took myself down to the IHS Expo in Blackpool and picked up 2 dream species. The first new addition is this smooth knobtail gecko, also known as Nephrus levis. I actually found these guys in the wild in Shark Bay, Australia, so having one for myself is an absolute dream come true. I also found this second species in Australia in the wild, and this is the golden spiny tail gecko, also known as Strophrus taenicorda. In my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful geckos of all time. I of course had to give the new additions names and labels. I called my smooth knobtail gecko Terry, like a little chocolate orange, and my golden spiny tail is called Lamington, which is an Australian cake. If you would like to get your own enclosure labels, then you can get them from my Etsy store, which is Ellie's Exotic Designs. They are all handmade and shipped by myself, and Tim Tam gives the stamp of approval, of course. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and thank you so much for watching all the parts of my reptile room build. Stay tuned for the tour of the full room and for more exciting content like this that you're seeing on the screen. Trust me, you do not want to miss that video. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.